We get John to take us through the notice and summons of the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. To all members of the Governance and Strategic Planning Committee, you're hereby summoned to attend the monthly meeting of the committee, which will be a hybrid meeting conducted remotely via WebEx and physically here in the Council Chamber in the Guildhall, Tuesday the 5th of May at 4 o'clock. Starting with the roll call, Alderman Cook.
Online, John.
Alderman Hussey. Aye. Alderman Carrigan.
Online, John.
Councillor Sandra Duffy.
Sure.
Councillor Farrell.
Here.
Councillor Harkin. Councillor Hart.
Hanshaw, here, Lena.
Councillor Jackson.
Just stepped out to take a phone call, but he's here.
Thank you. Councillor Leonard.
Shaw.
Councillor McDade. Councillor McGinley.
And Shaw.
Councillor Tierney.
Apologies.
And Councillor Nealis. Thank you, members.
Thank you, John. I'm just going to do the broadcast statement. So I'd like to remind everyone physically present at this meeting or in attendance remotely, this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol. Due to your attendance at this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. A copy of the Council privacy notice may be found on the Council website www.derrystrabane.com. Okay, and just go on then. Is there any declarations of members' interests? Councillor Duffy.
Good Chair, I should probably just declare an interest in the Complex Lives presentation, as I do work for homeless services here within the city.
And Alderman Hussey.
I'm not sure which item it is. It's the item with regard to outside body organisations, National Association of Councillors, obviously, and Friends of the Song.
Alderman Hussey. Okay. Anybody online? No. All right. So we're just going to go in straight to our first deputation, and I would like to welcome online today. We have Yvonne Hill and Nicola Lane, who have joined us from Belfast City Council, and they are here to discuss Complex Lives. Yvonne and Nicola, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll just give you 10 to 15 minutes for your presentation, and then we'll open it up to questions from the floor. I'll take the questions in groups. So if you just want to take notes when the questions are being asked, and then I'll bring it back to yourselves and then go back out again, okay?
Yes, no problem. Thank you. Okay, thank you for having us today. My name is Yvonne Hill and I am the Complex Lives Manager at Belfast City Council. And I've got Nicola Lane with me as well, who's supporting me today with this presentation. Nicola Lane is a Neighbourhood Services Manager for Belfast City Council also, and has strategic oversight of the Complex Lives Initiative. If you can just skip to the next slide, please. Okay, so we wanted to start with just kind of giving you a bit of an understanding as to where Complex Lives has derived from, where it had come from. So back around 2019 or so, there was a high level of public, media and political concern and interest on the issues of drug and alcohol and mental health. There was a rise in deaths in relation to drugs and alcohol. There was a rise in homelessness presentations, and generally just a lot of concern about that particular cohort of people. And there was definitely a perception that not enough was being done, particularly at the political scene, but also organisationally, in terms of there just wasn't enough resources and capacity to deal with the amount of issues that the city centre were facing. Did you want to come there? No, sorry. Public sector change was required, and that was initiated really at that point by the Belfast Strategic Leadership Group. If you'd like to skip to the next slide, please. So the role of community planning, like I said, in 2019, then we kind of sat up and took a bit more notice of what was going on in the city. And the Belfast Drug and Alcohol Coordination Team, or known as BDACT, made a recommendation to the community planning group. And really it was in three areas: short term, medium and longer term. So In the short term, really, we wanted to, they had suggested maybe that we start to target coordinated pieces of work to address the needs of injecting drug users in the city, with a particular focus on, sorry, one second, I'm getting a notification there, with a particular focus on improving communication and coordination. Then in the medium term, it was to review the role and the purpose of each organisation, and that was really looking at condensing and consolidating, but also where the clear lines of responsibility and accountability lay, and it really to bring about effective and meaningful engagement across the agencies. And then in the longer term was to establish a citywide commissioning group. Next slide, please. So then the kind of agreed way forward at that point was the strategic leadership group was already in place in terms of drugs and alcohol, and it felt like a good fit really for where Complex Lives should be. And there was a senior commitment at that point and focus on really the way forward. So as you can see here, these some of the organisations that were involved in the early stages then, and that were the senior leadership group or the strategic leadership group had representation, and that's Belfast City Council, the Trust at that point, Public Health Agency, Belfast Health and Social Care Trust, the Police Service of Northern Ireland, the Housing Executive, the Ambulance Service, TransLink, and BDAC themselves. And then there was a strong link at that point then to Community Plan and Partnership and the Living Here Board. And we were looking at development of overarching strategic vision, political engagement at all levels, and unblocking barriers to delivery. Next slide, please. So we knew that we needed to do something. We'd done a bit of research then, and we looked really at models that were already existing in the UK and South. And what we saw then was a thriving Complex Lives in the Doncaster area. And really it's a whole system approach. So the Complex Lives was a multi-agency delivery group, and so at that point that was aligned with the BDAC priorities and action plans. There was a development of an action plan and a roadmap, and we'll talk about more about that as we go through. We got strategic support from Doncaster from the Complex Lives model that was already up and running and working so well in Doncaster, and at that point a critical friend. We had potential co-location of teams and support. So we were looking at, like, you know, if we were to set up a multi-agency hub, how would we do that and how would we work better together? And we saw co-location as a key I suppose initiative that we would want to take forward, and identifying vulnerable people at risk and mobilising and support. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is a bit more about the whole systems approach. So the whole system approach is about bringing not just the breadth of agencies and services across health, criminal justice, skills and employment, and so other supports in a shared and agreed sustainable way, but it's also about the depth, focusing on making real lasting system changes to enable services to work at the front line together. So, I mean, this is Belfast City Council's role in the whole systems approach is really about coordination, bringing those organisations together, working as the honest broker, and really giving a forum or a platform to have conversations about vulnerable individuals who are chronically homeless. Next slide, please. So this is who's involved. So the initiative is funded by statutory services, and they are the Housing Executive, Public Health Agency, Belfast City Council, the PCSP, and the Probation Board of Northern Ireland. The multidisciplinary, you can see that the organisations here, the agencies that you can see in the black are obviously our statutory organisations. The one that sits outside of that, just in the orange on the left hand side, is also the trust, where we have an intensive support worker currently in the drug outreach team. But really the statutory organisations that are involved are ourselves. We have our Belfast City Council Safer Neighbourhood Officers are part of that. The Northern Ireland Housing Executive, the Belfast Health Trust, which there are basically two areas within that, are the Inclusion Health Service, homeless, they focus on homeless individuals, and then the drug outreach team, which has a drop-in service and also an intensive support worker. The Police Service in Northern Ireland, the Probation Board, and the Prison Service, which are a brand new partner as of February 2026. They've just come under our shared data sharing agreement. The partners then that you can see on the right-hand side are our charity and voluntary agencies, which it would be impossible to do what we do without these agencies. As you can see, we've brought together DePaul, Extern, and the Simon Community and the Welcome Organisation alongside those statutory agencies to really just start to work better together and to improve services and outcomes for individuals who are chronically homeless. Next slide, please. So how it works. I should also have mentioned there that the intensive support worker function. So there are currently funding for 6 intensive support workers. 4 of those intensive support workers are funded by the Housing Executive and 2 are funded by the PHA. And all of those intensive support workers are to add an additionality to what's already existing within those charity and voluntary agencies and the drug outreach team. It's not to create a new service layer, and it's not to create a new service in itself. What we wanted to do was try to find capacity within each of those agencies and organisations to provide an additional service, or I suppose an additional additionality to what they already had existing. So we looked at like outreach teams, obvious, I suppose, situations where workers are already making contact with individuals who are chronically homeless. It works by, the multidisciplinary team is really a single access point of wraparound support. We don't want people to have to retell their story over and over again. And that, I mean, every service can tell you the same thing. No individual wants to continue to tell their story. It can re-traumatize, at the very least re-traumatize. And so the idea behind the multidisciplinary team is you tell us at once and we know the story and we get it, and we know that that's the basis on which we start to work from. The team will then focus on really initially stabilising that person and then managing any key changes and looking towards the longer term support. We will always seek to provide and do what we can to find safe and appropriate accommodation. And that working really closely with the Housing Executive, it's again impossible to do it without them. We always seek for a trusted relationships, so we know that individuals work better when they're working with a key worker who they can trust and who they understand, who they know is going to be there for them. He'll give them chance after chance, and that key worker then will coordinate and do their best really to try and continue that wraparound support for that individual. Complex Lives will also identify situations and places and areas where people are most vulnerable. So we work really closely with another forum in Belfast called the City Centre Tasking Group. And the City Centre Tasking Group focuses on the place-based conversation. So where are people rough sleeping? Where is there most street activity at the minute? What are the hotspots in the city centre so that we can target our support to those areas? The core team then will also work with broader services to coordinate and operate as a full-time network of support. And that full-time network of support is daily. So people are lifting the phone every day. We'll ring and say, can we get some help from the Housing Executive today? Can we do whatever, work with the drug outreach team? Can we get someone round to a specific area where we know someone's going to be today? So it's a constant network of support, and the team around the multidisciplinary team are relentless. They just don't stop, and we just keep going until we do everything we can to support the individual. Next slide, please. So a bit about the kind of operational progress, like where are we today? So approximately 300 people have been identified as chronically homeless in Belfast. 230 of those people have been supported by the multidisciplinary team to date. And more than half of those people who have been supported, so more than half of the 230 people have been supported at some point in their journey from transitioning from prison into the community. So it's a significant number of people who are involved in the criminal justice system. 61 of those individuals, again, 61 of the 230, have been supported into tenancies, where 48 have sustained a tenancy for more than 6 months, and 13 of those are new tenants. So those are people who have had a tenancy for less than 6 months. And the vast majority of the individuals that we are supporting are experiencing positive outcomes. It sits at around 80 to 88% positive engagement with Complex Lives. Next slide, please. So operational progress, then we have managed to get our 10th, just had the prison service join our data sharing agreement, but we now have 10 partners who have signed a data sharing agreement, and it's pretty transformational. It's transformational for lots of reasons, and it's been a difficult road. It hasn't been an easy road to kind of go down. Organisations are rightly anxious about sharing data and some more so than others. So it's been a journey that we've really had to go on, and I could give you a presentation on that on its own, but it's been a real a real journey for us. We have now got a data sharing agreement that has been signed and mobilised, and really that mobilisation has happened from October of last year, October of 2025. We worked through some operational protocols, and we have now work under the lawful basis of public task, which means that we no longer need to seek consent from individuals who we aren't even certain can give real informed consent for us to begin working with them. So we now work under the lawful basis of public task. Next slide, please. Thank you. And more recently then, literally just at the start of April there, we have kicked off with a brand new shared case management system. And that it really is allowing us for more robust and real time recording and information sharing. It's going to give us one point. It gives us one view of somebody's journey, and that could be through all the different organisations, through all the agencies that they're working with. It will facilitate the production of measurable outcomes and management reports. So we will actually be able to provide outcomes. We'll be able to talk more, I suppose, about figures and facts. Where at the minute we know that we're doing fantastic work, and we can share that really with case studies. We can share that with anecdotally. But this will give us, I suppose, a more robust way of doing that. It's accessible to all of our partners and with manageable permissions. And like I said, it's been live really from the 1st of April. Next slide, please. So further integration. So where are we headed? There's a plan for long-term co-location. We've never lost sight of that. We still have that in our mind's eye, but that's, I suppose, again, it's still a little bit further down the line. We're working through the developments, and we're working through a roadmap or a route map for the future of complex lives. What we'd really like to see is we'd like to be part of a multi-agency hub and have kind of that engine room, work from that engine room, and where we would maybe have daily briefings even. So we're, even if it's 15 minutes a day, to talk about where is it we need to, target our support to. And the next development that the journey that we want to go on is co-occurring conditions and jail diagnosis. So we want to improve support and access for people who have both mental health issues and substance misuse issues, because again, and it's been certainly for the length of time that I've been working in homelessness, it's certainly been an issue the entire time. So we know that that's something that we need to get better at, and we certainly want to be part of the conversation when that's involved. Next slide, please. Critical time interventions for complex lives. Suppose we would say that we've always really been doing critical time interventions, but in terms of critical time interventions, I think our Hide Bank pilot is a really, really good example of where critical time interventions really work. So it's about, it does what it says in the tin. It's literally about intervening at times when somebody's about to go into a transition of some description. So that could be leaving prison, it could be leaving long-term hospital stay, or it could just be somebody moving into a new tenancy. But like I said, the Hide Bank pilot that we have, we've started a Hide Bank pilot with Hide Bank on the 1st of February. And that really is just focusing in on getting better at release planning. And we all know that people can be released and we can't plan for some of that. If they're released on a Friday and nobody kind of knew it was going to happen, going to prison or whatever, they go to court. But what we want to do is get better at planning where we can. So we're working with Hide Bank on doing that. So improve release planning. We want and we will provide immediate and practical support on release. And that's, does the person have a phone? Do they have access to food? Do they have somewhere safe to go? And then we'll look then at the longer term model through their homelessness journey. Don't want them to do is back into prison. We want to try and help break that cycle. So we're also then targeting our support around specialist support for women or for victims of trafficking and sex exploitation, and also specialist support for addiction and substance use for obvious reasons. With a longer term goal then to support those women out of homelessness and to exit them out of it. Next slide, please. So yeah, we'll introduce you to Julie. So it's just a bit of, I suppose, what's it like for the individual when they're going through the complex lives journey. So Julie was entrenched in street homelessness. She was opiate dependent, an amputee and a full-time wheelchair user. Partners serious concerns regarding both her physical health and her mental health, and antisocial behaviour was a continuing and escalating issue, and individually services just couldn't manage the risk and meet her needs on their own. In 1 year, Julie had extensive number of temporary accommodation placements. All were very short and with many breaks in between. And during those breaks, she was back to off sleeping, sofa surfing, she was in hospital or in custody. So we became kind of aware of her and we were notified, and we talk about notification as opposed to referrals to Complex Lives. So we were notified of Julie and we began working together to help Julie out of the chaos. She moved into temporary accommodation placement with wraparound support, which was accessible for her healthcare needs. We offered her tenancy support, addiction and harm reduction support, and she was allocated an intensive support worker. She sustained that placement, I shouldn't say tenancy, sorry, but she sustained that placement for 1 year. Permanent tenancy then came up, and we went into full wraparound mode. We work closely with the PSNI to help keep an eye on community tensions, because we know that that's likely going to be an issue given the history of Julie. And we packed in the support. And whilst the move has not been without its issues, and it really hasn't, as you would expect, there's been pitfalls throughout the way, but she's remained there with continued support, and she'll be there for 3 years in July of this year. So I think it's just a really good example of where Complex Lives can really work for someone. Next slide, please. So yeah, the future for Complex Lives really is to continue to bring about some lasting system change. It's not just about working with as much focuses on the individual, and it always will be, but it's also about how do we change systems for the longer term and improve services for people, for the future people that we're working with, and seamless pathways to services. So any questions? I think that's probably us. Have you anything else to add? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Yvonne and Nicola. It was really interesting and really optimistic to see the work that you're doing. And I think the name Complex Lives just gives that dignity, and it's really, really important that people in that situation have that wraparound help. I'm going to open it up to the floor here, and the first indicated speaker is Councillor Duffy.
Chair, and Yvonne and Nicola, thank you so much for coming on today with the presentation. I have to say I was furiously scribbling notes throughout the whole time that you were talking. A lot of my notes are probably something that I might want to follow up with you and ask you offline as somebody who works in the homeless sector. I have to say I think that the Complex Lives model is something that has been absolutely fantastic to see delivered in and around Belfast. And I suppose part of the reason for asking you to come here today was to look if it is something that we could explore here in terms of addressing some of the issues that we have. We have absolutely fantastic services within the homeless sector, but at times you feel that you're working in a silo, or some of the coordination is maybe a wee bit ad hoc. We have really vulnerable people that a lot of us are working with, and we're working with the same person, but sometimes are we replicating what's being done rather than sharing a journey of how we ensure that that person is getting the right support at the right time, getting that wraparound support, and then all the agencies in terms of, maybe criminal justice, policing, the trust, social services, and particularly I was interested when you were talking about the dual diagnosis aspect of it, because it has always been an issue for as long as I've been working in homelessness. But I think maybe that coordinating approach to it, and particularly the data sharing element of it, because sometimes that's where we come into the most difficulties. And we're trying to share information with maybe the police about things that are coming up, and maybe we just can't, and likewise the other way. So if those data sharing aspects of it would be absolutely fantastic to see. I think what you do is you force all services, not force, maybe that's too strong a word, but you ensure that all the services are working together, and the person who is vulnerable and homeless, with complex lives or chaotic lives, as we see it at times, is at the centre of absolutely everything that we do, and everything. And I like your daily briefing idea as well, because that again puts the focus on it, and that sort of place-based conversations, because I know from here and where the hotspots are going to be today, tomorrow, where people were yesterday. So it's about making sure that everybody who has a role to play in that support and trying to address those issues knows, right, say today we're going to be here and tomorrow we will have addiction services here. So I think that the opportunities that you bring are absolutely fantastic and stuff that we should be following up on. The High Bank pilot as well really interests me because too often we have seen those transitions and people maybe leaving prison with nowhere to stay and no support. And it's a very quick turnaround to seeing them back inside, which isn't right either. So if there was more that we could be doing there. I suppose one of the questions that I do have for you is, so the housing executive are they have paid for 4 intensive support workers, PHA 2. The housing executive, is that coming from supporting people or homeless budgets? That's for no, go ahead, that's okay.
No, go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, and I suppose let me see what, because I know I just need to get my questions in, or the chair's going to shut me down. No, I'm conscious other people are looking to come on. Your thoughts on transferring this to Jerry? I suppose I would be interested in hearing that, and then how we could be working to unblock the barriers for delivery. And let me see what other questions I wrote down while you were talking. Just, I suppose that data sharing, how you got to that point, because I think that's probably one of the most important questions I can see, because I think that it would really allow us to put the person at the centre of everything we do if we were able to share information more readily. But thank you, and I'm going to say as well, we have a civic forum here in the city where we bring together a lot of the agencies and services that are involved in this work. So it's more targeted around people who are at the coalface and doing the work. And I think maybe a presentation there should be something that we should look at rather than just sort of at this sort of political level, because I know I have taken loads of notes as somebody who's involved in the sector, and I think other people would find that really interesting as well. But thank you so much for coming today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy, for your deputation. And only joking. Councillor Farrell, you're next.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Nicola and Yvonne for attending today. And I don't have the detailed knowledge that Councillor Duffy has of this sector, so I don't really have any questions for you per se, because, you know, you've got a project that's based in Belfast and it's been designed specifically with Belfast in mind. You know, Derry is a very different city. So I think, you know, what the conversation needs to be about is how a similar model could be implemented here. One that is area specific, one that takes into consideration the particular challenges that we face, and not just Derry, the wider council area. But I think that any project, any initiative that helps people with addiction, mental health issues who are experiencing chronic homelessness should be welcomed. And it is worth noting, and this isn't a stat that we're happy about at all, in the 2024 year, Derry and Strabane had the highest percentage of homeless deaths. That's not something we're proud of at all. 13 people passed away who were experiencing chronic homelessness. So we think every effort must be taken to reduce those figures so people can live longer, better quality, more fulfilling lives. So it is complex, it is complicated. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. But it's great to see positive outcomes in Belfast, and we would like to see it if those could be replicated here. So I've just got, there's a couple of things in my mind about, you know, how we could do that. So obviously we would want to know, could this be implemented here, or would it be a slightly different model based on the particular challenges, the population, etc. there's buy-in from a number of statutory agencies and voluntary agencies as well. I know we've got terrific working relationships and partnerships with, organisations right across the city, and I would hope that that could be replicated. And then it's the eternal question of funding. So where, like a lot of statutory agencies have funding difficulties. The same can be said across the community and voluntary sector. So how is this funded across this city and district? I think it possibly could be a discussion point at the Civic Forum involving our partners in the Health and Communities Directorate and possibly the Healthy Cities as well. But ladies, thanks for coming. Really, really interesting. Great to see positive outcomes. But for us, it's about, how we implement something similar, if not better, here in this city and district. So thanks very much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Farrell, Yvonne and Nicola, I'll let you come back in response to those, and then we have 2 more indicated speakers after that, okay?
Okay, thank you very much, Sharon. I think maybe particularly, I suppose, something that has been raised in both deputations there, as you called them, it was about the translation of this from Belfast to Derry. I suppose one of the things that I would say is, and particularly in terms of funding, etc., it really did come through the community planning partnership, was where really the impetus for this came. But the other part was the council actually put a significant amount of resource into this and did agree to have I suppose, there was a number of I suppose, people within the council who started it off, but we did then pay for the strategic support from Doncaster, because again, Belfast just didn't come up this by itself. It actually looked at other models as well too, and Doncaster was the one which seemed most clearly aligned. So Belfast actually paid for the strategic support and advice from Doncaster. And obviously, as we had those discussions along with the relevant partners and the community and voluntary sector as well, then that was where we got particular parts of funding. So council actually agreed and did part fund 2 posts, which is Avon's, the Complex Lives Manager, and the Project Support Officer. There was also then support came in from the PCSP, because obviously a lot of the issues that we're presenting did work around the remit of the PCSP. And there was also, I think at that stage, the police then gave some money, as did the probation board, because obviously all of those were impacting. So I think part of the aspect is to look at where, I suppose, where in terms of any positive outcomes, which organisation really has the remit for them. And obviously the Housing Executive also came in very strongly and have been obviously a staunch supporter and key partner within this. But there was also the realisation that in terms of those organisations who were actually providing the support for chronic homelessness absolutely had to be key, and as part of that, the discussion with the statutory agencies, because obviously they were the ones who were actually delivering right there at the coalface. So that was really sort of how it started, and in terms of the pieces of funding, and actually probably for about a year or 2, we maybe nearly had to put, I suppose I had to ask all of the partners each year, and sometimes when we got in-year funding, etc., whatever. However, from last year, the council now actually does fund the 2 workers. And I suppose the other part is also that in terms of the role that the council played here, people saw the council as, because of the remit actually for housing, then we were able to kind of be the honest brokers and bring everybody together. But we also have had to counter the narrative. It's not the council that set up a new service. It's literally coordinating those that are already there and have been doing incredible work. So I suppose that's just really in terms of if you're looking at the role and the funding and bringing something, I suppose, to Derry and Strabane. Certainly that would be something that would need to be looked at in relation to that.
Thank you. So I have Alderman Kerrigan online, and then I have Alderman Hussey.
Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me in. No, thank you, Yvonne and Nicola, for the presentation. And it's good to see that the work that's undertaken and how the funding has been used and how you are having some success, because we understand just the title sums it up, the complex lives that there are, particularly in the greater Belfast area. I sit on the housing executive, and therefore I see the supporting people money and how it has been allocated and the constant demand for that. So it's good to see it from the other end of yourself, sort of as the provider, and you or the service provider, and how it is the impact that it can have, and how it's actually being used, because I'm always hearing it from the other side of this project's funded, that project's funded, and sort of a detail from the housing executive side. But it's great to see that joint up approach with they're playing a small part in it, but then with all your other partners and how the thing is working. And it's interesting, you have touched on it there, and some to the answers to Councillor Farr, Councillor Duffy there, in regards to trying to see the mirror image of this from Belfast City Council onto Derry City and Staman and to the district. So no, more so just a comment of thanks for coming in today. Thanks for your presentation, and it's good for me personally to have seen the impact of it from the other side. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Garmagat, Alderman Kerrigan, and now Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Your presentation, I'm presuming, was via Belfast City Council and more or less coterminous with the Belfast Trust. And I agree with others who have said, what you have presented to us is extremely interesting and can be useful. But I use that terminology, can be useful. It's not a template, I believe, that could transfer directly from the east to the west, given the topography and geography of our council area with a large rural area. That doesn't take away from the fact that there is the catalyst that you're providing can be brought to operation within our council area. For example, our Western Trust covers more than one council area, and addiction and drug services for some people in our area are actually based in another district council area in Omagh. Do you see that sort of boundary that does exist being a hindrance, or is it something that can be developed, and maybe not so much on a Londonderry second city type approach, but a Western approach as opposed to one council area? Thank you.
I suppose in some ways we're not necessarily qualified because, as you say, we are dealing with one trust. However, I suppose just our experience. So, say for example, whenever we have had people from the complex lives cohort and they've been in prison, we then have had to deal with, I suppose, the South Eastern trust as well, because some of the healthcare provision, etc., is in another trust. So I do think obviously it is something else that you have to think about in exactly like the data sharing agreements, etc., whatever. And obviously when you're dealing with more people. But I think if you're looking at that kind of model, then what you look at is what are the barriers and what are the potential things that actually could hinder. And certainly, yes, it might be another partner that you have to think about. And maybe, I suppose the other part is it's about using your health partners and they know best. It's not about necessarily the council knows best, because certainly I have to say, whenever we are working across, I mean, Yvonne is a complex lives manager, very much comes from a background around homelessness, etc., whatever. Obviously, that wouldn't necessarily be something that councils are into the very detail of. But part of this is because it is partners who have an expertise and technicality. So sometimes you can be guided by your partners who can actually help in that. So certainly I wouldn't necessarily say we can't do this because it's across two trusts. I think it's about having those particular conversations and probably using senior leadership around that to see what the possibilities are.
Through you, Chair, thank you. I found that response extremely useful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anybody else indicating to speak.
Chair, can I just make one last comment? And I am going to be brief with this last comment, and I was remiss of me not to make it. In your presentation, you said that you have 48 people who have sustained tenancies over 6 months. And I want to just congratulate you on that because I know how difficult that is. So I think that's a significant statistic and number that you have on that presentation. And I just wanted to comment on it and saying that shows the success of what you're doing. So well done.
Thanks, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I suppose just if I could just be very brief and finish off and saying that sometimes people have an idea of what success looks like, and for those who work in this area, they will know how very difficult and complex it can be. And sometimes our I suppose our measure of success can be that we have kept somebody alive for another day. So it's about, I suppose, managing expectations there as well, given the very, very, I suppose, complex nature of the issue that we're dealing with. But thank you very much for the opportunity to present, and we're happy to provide any information or any thoughts that you need at another stage.
Thank you very much, Yvonne and Nicola. I'm sure that's not the last you're going to hear from our council team anyway regarding this. So thank you for taking the time today to come on, and good luck.
Lovely.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Chair, could I just ask a question based on the presentation? So it was really, really useful. I think it's very, very informative. We haven't really agreed anything in terms of how we move this forward. So could I ask the senior leadership team just to have a think about what way we could potentially explore or develop this across directorates?
Yeah, Chair, I didn't want to come in just in the middle of all of that, but it might be helpful to members. So under the recent Pride in Place funding, previously Towns Fund funding, one of the initiatives that came forward that has received approval of funding is a new vulnerability initiative working across the partners. Again, trying to figure out how that works with the other agencies that are in that space. So perhaps in the first instance, it might be useful for this committee to receive a presentation from that group once funding is secured. Councillor Duffy.
Thank you. Yeah, so the group just, I'll take off my council lanyard. So the group has been meeting in terms of the vulnerability piece. So first housing in terms of night support and Dairy Dime, our homeless nurse, the CCI, and then different agencies with the Western Trust, and have been around the table, and we have been looking at the vulnerability piece and how we can bring that forward. There has also been engagement with service users who have stated what they would like to see and what would be important to them. There is a presentation in terms of Pride of Place to the Civic Forum on the 19th of May. So if anybody is available, they could come and get an update there on some of the work that's being done.
Thank you. Sorry, Alderman Hussey's just wanting in there too.
Just the obvious question to our second presenter. The work that has been done, is it citywide or is it district-wide?
At this point, it is citywide because it's the Pride and Place. It's the Pride and Place funding, but on another level, we do have services that are in rural areas. We have services that are based in Strabane. We have services based in Omagh and in Enniskillen as well that are all doing pieces of work. But it's probably the coordination of all that we do need to be mindful of.
Okay, we're moving on now to our second deputation. So we have Tanya White here and John Daly. You're very welcome here today. Tanya, you're going to start with the presentation, aren't you? So they are here today from the Northern and Western Regional Assembly in relation to the upcoming Regional Spatial and Economic Strategy Review. So very welcome if you want to get started.
Thank you, and thank you to Chair, Councillors, Alderman, Chief Executive and Executive of Derry City and Strabane District Council and this committee for inviting us, which I think may have risen on foot of a statutory notification we had to give you about our review, and we're delighted that we were invited here to go through, I suppose, what we are doing and how maybe you can get involved in that. As the Northern and Western Region Assembly, you know, bounds so many of your own counties of Northern Ireland, we are really happy to be here and to work with you going forward. So next slide, please. So I'm briefly just going to give you an overview of regional assemblies in Ireland for anybody who's not aware of them. So basically, there are 3 regional assemblies in Ireland. We are the Northern and Western Regional Assembly, a nice mouthful everywhere we go. We're, I suppose, commonly known as the NWRA. So you can see from that slide the other 2 regional assemblies, which is EMRA, which is the Eastern and Midlands Regional Assembly, and the Southern Regional Assembly, known as SRA. I'll just talk about our own regional assembly. Really, we have 8 counties and 9 local authorities in our regional assembly area, from Donegal right down to Galway. You'll probably get the slides later. They're all listed there. We also have strategic planning areas within that, and the border region is one and the west is the other. So that just gives you an outline of what we are. We have elected members on our assemblies, and they are nominated by the constituent local authorities, and that ranges between 2 and maybe 4 elected members from each of the councils. So we have 25 in total, including 2 members who are members of the Committee of the Regions, which is the EU, I suppose, connection with our region and regional assemblies. So overall, there's probably in and around 95 to 100 elected members in Ireland on the Committee of the Regions. Next slide, please. So what do we do? I suppose really we're a government body that sits between national government, central government and local authorities. And basically, I suppose our key aims, our key functions are planning, strategic planning and economic development for the region. We look at EU funding, and then we have the whole corporate thing to make our organisation run. So that sets out in the slide what we do. We also heavily advocate for, I suppose, infrastructure for the region, and we do a lot of research and development into a number of areas to support our advocacy. Next slide, please. So there, we also, one of our key functions is the Regional Spatial and Economic Strategy. They are the 3 strategies that are current in Ireland at the moment. We are all reviewing them because new planning legislation, which I'll go through in a minute, has been enacted. And we all commenced the review at the same time. So you can imagine that while it's a good thing, it's also very chaotic for everybody who is helping out along the way, especially for making submissions. Next slide, please. That's just to show you where the strategies sit in relation to national policy. So you'll have heard of the National Planning Framework. I think you may have made a submission to that yourselves. That is the top strategy. We have got to comply with the elements of that. So we take that and regionalise it, and we add in some nice little bits ourselves that we feel are missing. And then that feeds down to the development plans and area plans of the local authorities. And feeding in there, you'll see the different strategies and plans that feed in sideways. So again, you can have a look at that in your own time. Next, please. Okay, so what happened really was the National Planning Framework underwent a review it probably started late 2023, and by April 2025, the first revision was published. This kind of kick-started a review for our own strategies. In tandem with that, we had new planning and development legislation come in 2024, and the combination of the two has been really, I suppose, good thing for us, but it has, I suppose, been the impetus for updating all our strategies. The first iteration of the legislation, we were supposed to commence the review by last October. A new revision to the 24 Act in 25 within 6 months, which says how complicated planning can be, pushed that out for another 6 months. So we had to start the review by the 1st of April this year, and we started at the end of March with the other 2 assemblies. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to briefly outline what needs to be included in our strategies, and I suppose to outline that while our hands are slightly tied as to what we can do, we do have a bit of flexibility as well to allow us to bring in other elements that may not be included in the legislation. So that's the Planning Act. It sets it all out, what we need to do, what policy we have to take into consideration, how we have got to do our strategy and the process around that. Next slide, please. Interesting enough from it, we had no timelines given to us, which is very unusual, but I think that's going to be changed. So I suppose Section 29 of our Planning Act really sets out what we have got to put into our strategy. So it is quite a long section and quite complex, but we summarised it and grouped it as possible. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to do one overall strategy, but within it, these smaller, I suppose, strategies to make the overall strategy. So we've kind of summarised it into a settlement strategy, an economic and retail strategy, an infrastructure strategy, which will include renewable energy, which is very important, a marine and coastal strategy, a climate strategy, a natural and cultural environment strategy, an all-island cohesion strategy, an implementation and monitoring strategy, and we also have to include strategy statements to illustrate how we are complying with national policy. I suppose for today, the all-island cohesion strategy will be very important for yourselves and ourselves. But key to any strategy is implementation and monitoring. And if you don't have that, you can forget about it. It's just lying in there. So that is going to be a very big focus for us this time, that any policies we put into our strategy are implementable and we can monitor them. And John will go through a few slides later to show how we're really upping our game in data collection and analysis. Okay, next slide, please. Keep looking at you for the slides. Also, we have to do our environmental assessments of the strategies. So there are 3, and they run in tandem with our making the strategy. We have a strategic environmental assessment, an appropriate assessment, and a regional flood risk appraisal. And that informs our policy as to whether we're going down the right road or not. It can be, I suppose, controversial, but at the end of the day, we need to have something that does work and doesn't cause problems down the line for people. And again, the statements on how we have complied with all our statutory requirements, which have mostly come from the EU originally and international policy. Next slide, please. Okay, so the estimated timelines for the revised new regional strategies, as I was saying, there's nothing in the legislation really to give us any guidelines at the moment. We only have 2 statutory periods that are outlined, and that's the amount of time we have to do consultation for, a minimum amount of time. We are estimating we will have a draft strategy by Christmas this year, and that we will have an adopted strategy by Q2 next year. There is, I suppose, our minister is kind of putting a bit of pressure on us to get it done as soon as we can. We absolutely agree, but at the same time, we want a workable strategy. And as you see, there's an awful lot to be done in it. The team that we have, there's 10 of us on the team, and we're working collaboratively on producing the strategy. Next slide, please. So here I'm just highlighting that flexibility will be required because, as I said, was mentioned there, the planning and legislation is changing all the time, even after having a new act. So the Cabinet has approved a general scheme of a bill to be introduced in 2026. They're hoping to have this enacted by summer this year. And in it is changes already to the strategy that we're supposed to be doing. We're still waiting to see what they are going to look like. They're looking to maybe remove the need for a full revision of the 3 regional strategies, but that's still up in the air. They're amending a definition of key towns that we have, and they're looking at city and county plans to be reviewed and extended within a defined period, which is no harm because we will need to get the planning hierarchy back into sync. Also, national planning statements are being produced. We used to have, they were called Section 28 guidelines on planning policy. They are all being, I suppose, amended under the new act. And so they will be coming in. I think there's a programme of work of about 12 to 18 months to bring in about 35 different policy documents. So as we are writing our strategy, we are going to have to be flexible to bring in any new, I suppose, policy that comes in on that. So as you can see, we have our work cut out for us for the next 9 months or so. Next slide, please. So I suppose, what does the RSES and the process mean for you here? Well, I suppose that you would have been very aware of the National Planning Framework first revision, and I suppose there's a lot of support for an all-island approach to planning, economic development, etc. being the regional assembly that is mostly affected because of our geographical location, I would say it's really important that we take that on board in our strategy, and we want to work with you. So we would really, really appreciate a submission from you on that. Legally, it says in the Act, prescribed bodies which are listed are required to assist and cooperate with us in producing the strategy. I think that's a bit strong to be saying that, but if we're asking for help, we would like to ask in a nicer way. We are also obliged to consult with you, which we are very happy to do, and we have done that through the notification so far. And travelling up here today has been good too, to build up relationships. As well, we have to deal with areas of common interest. So we have a few there, cross-border mass. We're looking at, energy, infrastructure, education, things that you've been working on already, but how can we maybe strengthen and improve them that they can actually be delivered? And again, the implementation, that's it, about delivery. So it's about working together, I suppose, really effectively. And that's what we hope to do. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand you over to John Daly, my colleague here. He's our economist. He's actually does a lot of good work for us, and he's just going to give you a regional economic update to give you a flavour of where we're going with that element of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya, and thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for the opportunity to speak here today. We can just go to the next slide, actually. Just going to go through a very brief economic update on the economy of the North and West region of Ireland, I suppose, to inform your thinking, and obviously the revision of the regional spatial economic strategy, but also considering, I suppose, the interconnectedness of our region and, of course, the Derry City and Strabane area. And of course, the main update on this stems from recent news that the European Commission is actually upgrading the economy of the North and West region of Ireland, what was previously known as a transition region to now a leading economic status known as a more developed region. So for EU purposes, EU funding purposes, that is, regions within the EU 27 are categorized into one of the following three groups, which you can see there on the right-hand side of the slide. You're either considered a more developed region, a transition region, or a less developed region. And it all depends on how you perform in terms of GDP per capita relative to the EU 27 average when adjusted for price differences. Previously, under the previous EU evaluation period, 2015 to 2017, the North and West region of Ireland would have met the threshold as was called a transition region. That is a region with a GDP per capita between 75% and 100% of the EU 27 average. You can see it from the graphic there. It averaged at 84% during that evaluation period. So that meant we were a transition region up to the year of 2027, which obviously is due to end next year. But there's now going to be a new EU funding period of 2028 to 2034. And their EU evaluation period for that EU funding period is, as you see that yellow box there, the 2021 to 2023 period. And at that period, we're averaging GDP per capita of 104% of the EU 27 average. Hence, we're meeting the threshold of what you can see in the box there, a more developed region, which is a GDP per capita above 100% of the EU 27 average. So that reflects the fact that our economy has been growing in recent years. Economic output overall is about 40-odd billion euros. Unemployment is at 4.5% for the region, and employment is just over 480,000 people in full-time employment. But you can go to the next slide, please. But unfortunately, members, I suppose, and this is very relevant to yourselves, is the tale of two regions. So the North and West region of Ireland, as Tanya would have touched on earlier, is quite a large region, everything from Galway up to Donegal and across the Monaghan. But in the case of the border counties, which is Donegal, Sligo, Cavan, Monaghan and Leitrim, they are not performing as well in comparison to the likes of, say, the West, which you can see there in the sky blue bars, which includes Galway, Mayo and Roscommon. As you can see, the growth in recent years can be predominantly credited to an uplift in the West, which seems, based on the CSO figures, is a predominantly driven by the Galway City metropolitan area, to the point that you're talking is about the borders case in terms of GDP per capita is about 30-odd percentage points below the EU 27 average in terms of, whereas The West, in contrast, is about 30 odd percentage points above the EU 27 average. So effectively is a tale of two regions within a region. And obviously in the case of the border, it's very interconnected with yourselves in Derry City and Strabane. Now, there's obviously a number of factors are likely to have driven that, but we're due to produce a report later in the year that kind of looks at the underlying factors that are driving these disparities and probably most crucially what can be done from even recommendations about how to address these disparities and ensure that there is more even balanced regional development within the Northern Western region of Ireland. And some of those recommendations, I suspect, will be cross-border by nature and could be of relevance to yourselves. Just next slide, please. And then just to finish, I said I'd just highlight a new data initiative that the NWRA have recently launched, which is called the NWRA's County Data Dashboard. It's gone down very well with our local authorities and our stakeholders, and it's potentially something that could be looked at in terms of yourselves, in terms of Derry City and Strabane, because it seeks to go beyond looking at just census data, but actually look at more up-to-date kind of, I suppose, county data, or in your case, local government districts. So I'll just show you some of the Donegal results to give you an example of this. But the concept of it, oh, sorry, next slide, please. But the concept of this is simple. We want to show data that's very, I suppose, accessible, make it digestible, ensure that data is available at minimum on an annual basis, but some of these indicators are actually available on a monthly basis. But there's 5 areas we focus on in each county, each of the 8 counties of the Northern Western region of Ireland. You can see there Donegal, the first area you can see there is demographics. Usually, in the case of Donegal County Council, they would have relied on Census 2022 data. Obviously, in your case, it'd be Census 2021 data. But we're trying to go beyond that. So we have up-to-date county information there, as you see, as of April 2025, looking at the population of Donegal, the age breakdown, its share of the population. Next slide, please. But, there's other kind of, I suppose, indicators, even debit and credit card expenditure taking place in Donegal, say it's up to date of February 2026. But you can see there's, I won't go through all the slides now, but there's a demographics one, economics one, a low carbon society one, a housing one, and a transport one. And out of these indicators, you're talking just under 80% of the indicators are actually either 2025 or 2026. So the idea of it is to inform policymakers in a better manner in terms of data utilization, but also to bring all this information together, because ultimately, the Central Bank of Ireland data in terms of credit card and debit card expenditure would not be readily available. It's very difficult to actually find. But the fact we can put this information for each of the 8 counties of the Northern Western region of Ireland has been very useful for our local authorities, and it might be something that maybe you can explore yourselves, but just more about sharing kind of a best practice, because the feedback has been very positive. And you can just briefly run to the next slide again as well, please. And then just labour market conditions, and then the next slide again. Again, you can see the tax generated as a result of activity in Donegal. Next slide again, please. Then housing, obviously a very difficult situation at the moment in Donegal, as you can see from the red. And then just the last slide, the last 2 slides, you can just fire through again. And then that's the low carbon society one. And then the last slide again is transport one. So again, all these indicators are up to date. 80% odd are either 2025 or 2026. The idea of it is kind of reduce our reliance on census data, which is very useful at the time, but in the case of the Republic of Ireland, it's census 2022, and we're now in calendar year census of 2026. So virtually some of our local authorities are actually relying on data. It's nearly 4 years old. But look, this is kind of, I suppose, the role of the economist, just to highlight these kind of data initiatives, and maybe it's just something you can explore yourselves. And that's all from myself, and thanks very much for the opportunity to speak here.
Yep, Tanya's just wants to have one more wee point there.
Just I suppose to sum up, I suppose the importance really here is we would love to get a submission from you. That I suppose data, the source has to be reliable and up to date for it to be, I suppose, effective. We will also be looking at smart objectives in the strategy so that we can actually achieve them within the lifetime of the strategy. And just for noting, our strategy is going to be 20 years long. One of the key things in strategy is, well, we have to prioritise infrastructure and we have to rank the prioritisation. So that is going to be a difficult task with the region we have. So basically, I suppose that sums up everything from us, from our side. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And John, you want to know me, Matt? Yeah.
Chair, thanks for bringing me in, and thank you both for your presentation. And just to remind members that Strategic Business Manager Rachel has prepared the component parts of a draft response to the consultation, which is included in agenda item 9 for members' consideration. So just you might want to reflect on some of that when you're asking questions. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Okay, first indicated speaker then is Councillor McGinley.
Mega Chair, and thank you, Tanya and John. And I was just going to say that we have a response in the papers later in the meeting. But I do think it's a really, really impressive presentation. I think that highlighting the collaborative work and on an all-island basis is really, really important for an island of this size. It would make no sense to stop at a border that's been imposed, I suppose. But I do think it's a really, really good presentation. We do have some concerns, and it has been reflected through meetings at the North West Regional Development Group around that change from the transition and the more economically developed region, you know, in terms of how those figures are potentially skewed. John, as you had highlighted there in relation to the Galway region. So there is that wee bit of disparity, but it's good to hear that there is going to be a report being prepared on that. I don't really have many questions. The dashboard, I think, is really, really useful, and maybe it's something that we could look at as the North West City region for those types of figures. It helps our case, but I don't have any questions, but just thank you so much on our behalf for coming in. Thank you.
Councillor McGinley and Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Rachel, for the next paper that we're going to receive, because I think it very informs what we're talking about here. Councillor McGinley referred there to stopping at the border. The border that concerns me within the North and Western Assembly is the border at Ballyshannon. You know, it's blatant. You're looking at Donegal, which on the figures on your second slide is actually in the less developed region area. And it's been plummeted because funding went into Galway. How can that be addressed within the Assembly, within the projects going forward? Or is that an indication that there will be an addressing of that regional imbalance which exists? And as Councillor McGinley has referred to there, the fact that we have a very close relationship with Donegal through the North West Regional Development Group, that factor does cause me great concern as well, because we're a coterminous region within the island. And I'm saying that from my political background, but it's fact. The North West region, the city region, from Londonderry to Letterkenny, whatever, has to be considered as a block. And part of that block is being greatly hindered because of the imbalance that exists within the Northern and Western Assembly area. That concerns me. And as I said before, I thank Rachel for her paper that we'll look at later on.
Okay, and Councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tanya and John, for coming. I'm just going to echo the remarks of Alderman Hussey and Councillor Duffy. You know, we will respond to the consultation. You can be assured of that. And ultimately, what we want to see is the North West region on both sides of the border getting its fair share. You know, both Derry, Donegal, Tyrone have all been victims of partition, and we need to see the Irish government in its planning address the economic disparities that exist in the North West. And it is worth noting, and it'll be in the consultation, that this Derry, Donegal, or Derry, Letterkenny, Strabane region is the 4th most populous region on the island, and that needs to be reflected in the Irish government's thinking and strategy over the next 20 years. So thank you for coming. Really, really interesting. And we'll have a really, really interesting consultation response too. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to just go back to yourselves now to respond, and there are 2 more speakers after this. It's just to give you a chance to respond to us already.
Okay, well, I suppose collectively you've all, I suppose, really addressed what are the disparities between the West and the border areas. That is what we are going to really dig through with this report. And that's why we've commissioned this report, which we hope to have, I suppose, within the next couple of months. It is going to look and see what has happened. Why has Galway been so successful as well? And can those learnings be brought up to the border region? And vice versa, was there inequalities along the way? Was there not? Was it perceived? Was it that something happened that generated, I suppose, more in the Galway than whatever? We are going to actually dig down deep and see why did this happen and how we can address it. Part of that will be how can we address it? And it might be some kind of I suppose, more regional balance towards this area in the next round of funding or something, but we're not sure yet. But we are looking at all, I suppose, potential solutions to where we are at the moment, because we want the whole region to benefit, not just parts of it. Yep.
Yeah, just to respond there, I suppose specifically to yourself, Councillor Jose, how can the disparity be addressed? I suppose there's a number of areas when you look at the kind of literature from the OECD. Firstly, I suppose it's about addressing kind of obvious rural infrastructure deficits, whether that be in transport or higher education. I suppose a very interesting example that I would have previously spoken on before on panels in Ulster University and the McGee campus would have been the fact that Galway City and Limerick City have a similar population to the city of Londonderry, Derry, yet it has nearly multiple the size of a higher education footprint. And that's an obvious infrastructure deficit that can address, considering the importance of human capital in supporting economic development. And again, it comes back to the Northwest City region. That's another area that's been highlighted by the OECD, because what they refer to as agglomeration economies, but they're effectively are large urban centres of scale. And it's been repeatedly highlighted that the Northwest City region, when you include the Derry City and Strabane and Letterkenny area, is the fourth largest agglomeration economy in the island of Ireland. So there's a huge potential there, but while the numbers are there, you have to invest in it. So those kind of two areas I suspect will be arising in the kind of report, but again, it'll be interesting to see what the kind of findings come back later in the year on that. And in terms of cross-border collaboration, we would have highlighted in the review or submission on the review of the National Development Plan, which is the overarching capital plan, that several of the projects that actually were located in the Derry City and Strabane area. Two of those include obviously the A5, and also the expansion of the Ulster University's McGee campus towards 10,000. So there's just some areas of cross-border collaboration, but that's all from my side anyway.
Thanks. And Councillor Leonard's next.
Thank you for both for your presentation. I'd just like to ask, is there any consideration given to developing and sustaining rural communities? It's possibly in your settlement strategy, I'm not sure, but I just wonder if there's any consideration, because I'm sure in the 26 counties is the same as up here in the 6 counties, rural communities are getting decimated altogether. Just wonder if there's any consideration given that, how we can sustain a rural community. Thank you.
Carmel, Councillor Leonard, and online we have Alderman Kerrigan.
Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me in. And no, I do thank our presenters for the report and for the detail. And as I say, to be fair, Alderman Hussey's comments as well, it's in relation to the benefit to the entire Northwest area. And I do take on board comments made by Councillor Farrell in regards to the investment that has taken place within the city and Letterkenny and that. But to be Councillor Leonard there has maybe taken a point they're trying to raise, was because there are similarities. I'm thinking of areas up into Ahiarn and the Corgeries there and to the bordering area into Donegal, where there's just a complete there are very isolated that rural community, and they all have a great distance to travel. And I know there's vast ways of Donegal where where there's very little population, and it's all right taking it and supporting the urban centres, but it's is what touching on then the link of trying to sustain rural communities, you know, and we have that issue ourselves as well on within our council area. But no, as I say, much appreciated, Chair, for the presentation and for allowing me in. Thank you.
Okay, Tanya or John, do you want to come back on those ones?
Okay, yes, I suppose we're a very rural region. There's no doubt about that. So we will be taking that into consideration. I suppose the regional spatial economic strategy is at a regional level, but the policies do feed back down into the development plans and the local area plans of the local authorities. So that's where maybe more of the down on the ground, you know, development happens from that. But as John alluded to there as well, you know, an agglomeration economies brings about, I suppose, growth and wealth for surrounding areas, which would include rural economies. And they also, I suppose, the rural economies do also benefit from the infrastructure that may be provided. The infrastructure provided isn't just for, say, Derry and Donegal or whatever, it's for the region. You know, so to get from A to B, it benefits regions as well. But I absolutely hear you, and regeneration of our small towns and villages is crucial in this country. It is a European problem, which is quite interesting to see as well. But our own, I suppose, national central government have been doing an awful lot of work in the last couple of years that we're only really seeing come to fruition now to bring these smaller towns and villages back into play. But I suppose our settlement strategy is the city and MASP area, the regional growth centres, and then our key towns. And then thereunder is for your development plan and local area plans to pick up on. But there will be policies to help support local or rural areas because we are a rural society. And there are other ways of doing it as well. When we're doing our marine and coastal strategy, like an awful lot of rural areas are located in those areas. So it's for the benefit of the region. It just, I suppose, spirals out. I don't know if John wants to add something there.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Lennon. How to sustain rural populations? I think it's an interesting one because we currently have a European Interreg Europe project called Rural Proof that's kind of looking at best practices about how to exactly address that point. What's very interesting in actual fact, a lot of the EU partners are saying that the case of the Croí Cónaithe grant in the case of Ireland, which is whereby a certain level of grant rate will be provided for individuals that want to regenerate a vacant or derelict property. So depending on the grant rate, if it's vacant, it's a lower rate. If it's derelict, it's a higher rate. But with Sustainable Energy Authority Ireland grants, you can actually nearly get a grant of nearly €100,000, just under €100,000 to regenerate a vacant and derelict property. And that's been hugely successful. Our colleagues in Donegal County Council are a very good best practice example of that, whereby a lot of people now are finding it actually financially viable now to live in what was previously the centres of rural communities. Because when you kind of drive to a rural community, the vacancy and dereliction is predominantly concentrated in the kind of the core of the village, as opposed, not entirely, there's some in the countryside as well. But that's apparent from even our EU colleagues on the Rural Proof project. That is considered an actual best practice example, and it comes back to what we were talking about earlier: agglomeration. Agglomeration economies are often talked about economists in terms of urban centres of scale, but the same principle applies for rural communities as well. Because if you have more people living in the centre of the rural community, i.e., the village, you have more capabilities in terms of spending. It makes it more viable for, say, a pub, a restaurant, a cafe to be open, as opposed to if it was more spread out in terms of, say, one-off housing. Now, one-off housing is required in certain circumstances, particularly in the farming community, but that's just seen as how to sustain it is to make it financially viable to actually regenerate some of these vacant and derelict properties in villages. But that's just one example of how you'd sustain rural communities from our perspective anyway.
Okay, I don't see any other indicated speakers in the chamber or online. So thank you very much for coming in today and for the travel. And I know you've both taken a long journey to be here today. So really appreciate your time, and it will inform us going forward in our agenda paper. So thank you very much, Garamila, and stay at home.
Thank you.
Okay, so just moving on into the meeting itself now. Chairperson's business, I just have two things to raise. Firstly, this is the last meeting of this term for governance and strategic planning. I'd like to thank you all for your participation during the last year. I've really enjoyed being the chair. And thank you for easing me in gently and not being too hard on me. So it's been a really fast year, but I really appreciate it. Councillor Jackson.
Good Chair, and I suppose you're right. It has been a very fast year. It's hard to believe it's been a year since we've welcomed you into the position of chair. But from a Sinn Féin perspective, we just want to pass on our thanks for how you've conducted yourself and conducted the business of this committee. We had every confidence at the start of the year that you would do it digitally and that the committee business would run smoothly. And we weren't let down. So thanks for all your work that you've carried out as the chair of the committee, and look forward to the incumbent chair, whoever selected at the AGM next month. So, but on behalf of Sinn Féin, thanks for the work that you put onto the role and the business of this committee over the last 12 months.
Mila Fulcherove, and thanks for putting your confidence in me too. And Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and on behalf of the Ulster Unions Party, and well, specifically on behalf as a member of committee, can I similarly congratulate you for your year in office, for your fairness, for your diligence from the chair. It's been appreciated by myself and I'm sure all within committee. Well done on a good year.
Thank you very much, Alderman Hussey. And Councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair, and on behalf of the SDLP, I too wish to congratulate you for a very professional year. I think you've been approachable, fair, impartial, reasonable, and I think we all appreciate that. Also want to put on record thanks to the Vice Chair, who's not here today. But one thing going forward, and I'm surprised Derek hasn't mentioned it. I thought you were going to say about 2 delegations and the one thing, but that's not your fault. Thank you, Grace.
Councillor Farrell and Alderman Kerrigan.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in, and just to thank you for your term of office here, Chair. I haven't been on the committee for the full year, but I do note even when I was a non-committee member, you were always very fair and more than capable, and I didn't doubt that at any stage. So, as I say, thank you very much for the way you conducted the meetings and how fair you were to everyone. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you, Keith, and I do appreciate that. And Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll just add my voice as well to thanking you for your chairing this year. I thought you've done it excellently. I think you've been very fair. I think business has been ran very smoothly here, so not sure what you'll be doing next year, but all the best with that.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin, and it has run well, but it's been from the decorum of everybody in the chamber as well. And yeah, just as well to also extend my thanks to Councillor Tierney for being the vice. He did take the chair for me a couple of times, and I did really appreciate him being able to do that when I wasn't available. And I also just want to thank the team up here, especially to John, who has steered me through this and kept me in line. So, well, in line's not really the right word, but you know what I mean. He's kept me pointing at everything that I need to do next. So next up is the matters arising from the open minutes of governance and strategic planning held on the 31st of March 2026. Does anybody have anything they want to bring up? Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have a couple of things. The first one is 61. Which we had a very useful deputation with many speakers at it. And I think that there was a lot to unpack about that presentation. One thing that caused me a bit of alarm and was in the discussion about pricing going forward with the development of renewable energy. The utility regulator did say that they weren't confident or indicated that they weren't sure that electricity prices would come down as a result of our efforts to introduce more wind power and wind energy. And I just think, given the energy fuel cost crisis that we're in right now, that is very, very worrying. And I think that should be noted. We're doing a lot of work here to bring in renewables. Part of the idea was that it would lead to a reduction in prices because we'd no longer be held hostage to organisations like BP. But so it's worrying now that people who are the experts in this field don't actually aren't confident that this is where we're going. The second thing I wanted to do in relation to that presentation was commend Save the Moat campaigners who had written it's a version of a Freedom of Information request. It's called an Environmental Information Regulation, and they had written to Northern Ireland Electricity Network asking if there had been environmental screening for the big rebuild, which is at a cost of £250 million. And initially, the NIE had said that they didn't believe that they were a public body and didn't need to respond. And they've now done a U-turn on that, and they've now accepted that they're a public authority and they have to respond to those types of questions, which is really, really important given the type of work that they're doing. But this wouldn't have happened unless Save the Moat activists had actually done that. So it's very significant that they'll have to face more scrutiny, and that's a positive thing. So my question on this is when we think the paper that the deputation last week was to inform will become available to the council, because that is in response to the motion that included the deputation. Do we have an idea when that will be brought forward?
Through you, Chair. No, Councillor Harkin, I can't advise of the timeline at this minute in time. We're going to get together with the various departments, consider where we're at with regard to this and the information, produce a timeline, and then bring that in as a future paper.
Okay. Did you have another thing? Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. This is item 64/26, and it's Palestine, and I think Palestine isn't obviously on the front page of newspapers in the way that it was seemingly every day for nearly 2.5 years, and that's because of the so-called peace process or peace that the US President Trump announced. But there really isn't any peace, as everybody knows. There's up to today, there's been almost 1,000 Palestinians killed since that peace was announced, and it's still the case that many people in Gaza don't have enough food. Hundreds of thousands of children are still struggling to get access to food every day. So this is why the global flotilla left with hundreds of people on it. And it's outrageous that Israel has felt that they could attack the flotilla in international waters, and they have abducted members of that flotilla, including 7 people from Ireland, and are dragging them to the courts. While they abducted them off ships, they beat them up, they spat on them, they called them terrorists, and they threatened to kill them. And I think that this is absolutely abhorrent and disgraceful behaviour. The reason why that flotilla is going to Gaza is because of the fact that there's still a genocide. So I think we should do everything we can to demand the Irish government do everything it can to demand that the Irish activists are released and to demand free passage for the flotilla. And connected to that, Chair, is I see that Keir Starmer, and he's now been joined by the leader of the Tories, have been talking about banning Palestine solidarity marches. Now, the point that they're trying to do here is connected to what's happening to the flotilla, because what they're trying to do to the Palestine solidarity movement is criminalise it, blame it for attacks on Jewish people. And I think we've heard this argument again and again, but they don't have a problem with marches organised by the British fascist Tommy Robinson, whose entire agenda is rotten from top to bottom. but they do want to have Palestine solidarity marches banned. And what has happened in Westminster has had an impact here, because we've seen Palestine solidarity movement activists criminalised, harassed. So I think it's incumbent on this council as well to continue to be a loud advocate for Palestine solidarity. And I know that we are working on our ethical procurement policy, but that is going to be a key way of us continuing to stand up to what Israel is doing and demand accountability from government as well. I'm not sure if we're in a position to say where we are in relation to that ethical procurement policy being unveiled and actually implemented, but I think given what's happening in Palestine, given what the British government is attempting to do with this criminalisation approach, I think it's important that we have an aggressive plan to bring that forward.
That's okay. Councillor McGinley.
Chair, and just to agree with what Councillor Harkin has outlined, I do think we need to be moving forward on the ethical procurement and to get an update through as soon as possible. I do think that the criminalisation of Palestine solidarity protesters is wrong. I think that the actions of Israel, whilst are shocking and horrific, have stopped being as shocking, which is really, really bad. And the actions against the flotilla are illegal under international law. They've been abducted in Greek waters, somewhere that Israeli Navy shouldn't be anywhere near, if we're being frankly honest about it. So I just wanted to come in and put on record that we're in agreement with what Councillor Harkin has said there, and that as a council, our corporate position has been to be in support of the people of Palestine and their continued fight for self-determination and freedom and an end to the genocide. So I just felt it important to say that.
Okay, I was pressing the wrong button. Councillor McDade.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Harkin, for raising this, and actually thanks to Councillor McGinley last month too, because I don't think I spoke on it, but you spoke very eloquently on it, and I think it was just to note that. I agree with what everything's been said. Just want to put on record, obviously, our agreement with it. We do need to resist any kind of push from the British government to criminalise Palestine solidarity movement. We've seen it across the water, and we're seeing it here locally as well. So we just need to stand strong together, I think, and continue to kind of resist that with every tool that we have. What happened in the flotilla was barbaric, I think, is the only way. I mean, I suppose just to put on record our disgust and disappointment that this is happening. I agree with what Emma has said. The fact that this isn't shocking anymore is shocking in itself, that we're just kind of become used to this and become used to seeing it. And it's a terrible place to be. And I think we do need to, sometimes people can become tired fighting for these kind of causes. And I think it's important that we try and kind of reimburse ourselves with the energy and trying just to continue to fight it as much as we can from here, do what we can. On the ethical procurement policy, I just wondering if we could even get an update on when the next BDS working group might be. I don't think I've got an invitation on yet for it, so just to see when it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I'll go back to the lead legal services officer with regard to the next BDS meeting. And obviously, he's also leading on taking forward the ethical procurement policy, or how to take forward the ethical procurement policy. I think it's probably appropriate, he's given me a briefing on this, but it's probably appropriate that he updates the group first and then brings that into to governance committee with the issues surrounding it and how it might be taken forward.
Thank you, John. And Alderman Hussey, did you have another thing you wanted to come in on under the minutes? Yep. That's okay.
Yes, Chair. GSP 66 Northwest Partnership update. As Rachel and those who attend will know, one of the things that was mentioned at the last Northwest grouping was the issue of access to shared island funding. And I've noticed that or are officers aware of an upcoming conference on shared island funding in the Monaghan Peace Centre? And has or will our Northwest Group seek representation at that conference?
So through you, Chair, we haven't specifically alerted anyone in the group to that, but we can certainly do that. We can send it out through the chair and vice chair of the group to members if members would wish that to happen.
Could I suggest maybe contact with the Peace Centre in Monaghan and they'll have detail on it? Thank you.
Okay, if there isn't any other matters arising, I'm going to do something really rogue and go back to the chairperson's business because I forgot to mention the Jazz Festival in my bashfulness about all the gratitude for me being the chair. So I do apologise for going back, but I can't go on without mentioning the 25th year of the Jazz Festival and what a fantastic celebration that was put on by all the staff in the council. I'm sure while everybody else was out there enjoying themselves, the council officers involved were not, but we all really enjoyed it, and I just want to put it on record that it was another really wonderful, successful year. And the weather was mostly on our side, and I just want to congratulate everybody who was involved in putting it on. So I will move on to agenda item number 9, and it's Rachel that's taken us through that.
Thank you, Chair. I'll not dwell on this report too much because I know we've had a really good discussion about it, but I suppose this paper has been prepared basically because we're aware that we have to submit a consultation response by the 22nd of May, and it was important that we put the key points that we think should be in a submission to yourselves before it went in. So this report has been prepared in collaboration with our planning officers here who've looked at the RSES through a planning perspective, and you'll see some of their comments within it, and also based on the big substantive response that we submitted as a Northwest Regional Development Group with Donegal County Council to the National Planning Framework. So we already had agreement in terms of the 4 key points, which are detailed there in 3.4 of your report. So we're suggesting that we reiterate those points, and we've already discussed that already today. Unfortunately, you'll be aware, members, that the National Planning Framework did not come as far as what we would thought it would have given our substantive response in terms of balanced regional development. So obviously, this consultation gives us another opportunity to stress the points that we've already discussed. I'll not go into any other the points and details. You'll see in section 3.10 some of the context in which we will set the consultation response out. It talks about obviously our good partnership working within a cross-border arrangement and how we've got a good strong affiliation in terms of the Northwest City region. So there's some key points in that in section 3.10 and some details there in terms of planning and what their key points are. There also is a strategic environmental assessment as part of that, and thankfully our planning officers have looked at that and provided some consultation responses on that, and that's attached in Appendix 3 for your information. So the recommendation in front of you today, Chair, is to support the comments in section 3.4 to 3.11 and the submission of a consultation response to the RSES by the 22nd of May. Thank you, Chair.
Margaret, Rachel, and Councillor Duffy.
Margaret, Chair, and Rachel, thank you for the report. And there is a significant amount of work contained within it. And it is all really, anyone who sits on the Northwest Regional Development Group will be familiar with a lot of what is being said there, because it is stuff that we talk about very often. We have come a long way in terms of the Northwest City region and the work that we have done, but it is really important that we continue to remind people of who we are and what we are trying to achieve, and particularly around regional balance. And it has to go both ways. We are a region that has been left behind by probably Belfast and Dublin over different iterations. We are seeing a shift in terms of the executive at the minute, with regional balance being part of the programme for government, and we need to continue to see that coming from Dublin as well, because as a region we need to be ensuring that funding and services are coming in to what we have already discussed is quite a significant rural area as well. But the work that is contained within this consultation response is perfect in terms of what we need to be saying. So Rachel, thank you for preparing it, and I will be saving it for future use because the information contained in it is really important. So thank you for that. If it needs a proposer, I'm happy to propose it.
Okay, and Alderman Hussey.
Thank you for the opportunity, Chair. I've already thanked Rachel for the report that has been placed in front of us. And I totally agree with Councillor Duffy, strangely. The ignoring of our part of the island by both Dublin and Belfast has been ongoing ever since I was involved in any of the Northwest groupings that came together when we used to include, I think, Oma, not Oma, Limavady and other areas within that Northwest grouping. So since the early 1990s, this has been an ongoing issue, and it has got to be continually stressed that the information that's in the report that we have here to both Dublin and to Belfast to recognise that they have a duty to our area and they are not at this moment in time fulfilling that duty. So again, thanks to Rachel for the report. It's much appreciated. Thank you. And I second the recommendation.
Okay, and Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Rachel, for the document. And there is a lot in it. And but I wanted to just pull out one thing that I was glad to see in there, and that's the call for the prioritisation of the Letterkenny to Derry to Portadown rail line. I think that this is an absolute priority if we're going to address neglect for the Northwest. And so I think we have to keep being the advocate and the voice for this. And look, the All Ireland Strategic Review, we contributed immensely to it as a council district in the Northwest. I think it is disappointing that there is not a plan to link Sligo with Letterkenny, because that means that we still will not have an All Ireland rail network. And so I think we have to continue to be an advocate for that. That was one of the missing pieces from that review. And this is an opportunity, I think, to remind the Irish government of the need to address that, because if that doesn't get addressed, it will continue to have an impact on the Northwest, because it'll mean it remains isolated from other major cities. And look, for us, we know if we want to address issues of congestion, climate change, you know, the advancement of rail in the Northwest and across the island has to be an absolute priority. So thanks for putting that in and putting that emphasis on it as well.
Councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Rachel, for the report. Basically, what I'd said to Tanya and John is our position. We're really good at responding to consultations. Where it falls down as, you know, people don't listen as acutely as we would like, but we have to keep banging that drum. The Irish government, whilst there have been important interventions recently in terms of the 45 million for the shared island teaching block, in terms of the Derry Dublin PSO from the shared island unit, you know, that's encouraging, but we want to see a more strategic approach, and especially in terms of education provision and infrastructure. And it's not just to get to Derry or Saban, it's to link up Donegal as well. So I was going to mention the All Ireland Rail Review, but Sean Harkin beat me to it. I think the Irish government need to recognise that we are a cross-border city region, and you know all the maps they have. You know, we're cut out of it, but you know we're just there on the other side. So I think there needs to be a recognition that we exist here. I think there needs to be a recognition that whatever's good for the Northwest is good for people on both sides of the border. So I'm sure the submission will be amazing. I think it'll be strong. I think it'll be sensible. Let's just hope they listen this time, because you know, we've had poor experiences in the past, but that's not down to the efforts of the team here in council. and the Northwest Regional Development Group. Thank you.
Chair, just to come in on that point, and I think it's been a common point that's been raised, and Rachel has done a very substantial amount of work in this. We need to reiterate that within the Northern and Western Regional Assembly, as has been highlighted in the presentation, there's one very significant urban area within the map, essentially, and we need to be very, very clear in the opening statement of our submission that this city region, albeit it's in a different part of the island, the city region spans the border, and this other city region needs to be included and referenced strongly in this Northern and Western Regional Assembly document. Otherwise, Donegal is effectively treated as a rural, isolated part of the region without the influence of a city region on it. That point we have made through the national planning framework, and while it had some success, it didn't have the prominence that we wished it to see. So we will have another attempt through this document, and hopefully it'll be referenced in it.
Okay, thank you, John. I don't have any other indicated speakers, so that's been proposed by Councillor Duffy and seconded by Alderman Hussey. So we'll move on to agenda item number 10, and that's Ellen.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this report aims to provide you with details of the feedback received as a result of our consultation on the Council's improvement objectives for 26-27, and also to seek your comments and approval for the updated corporate plan and improvement plan for 26-27, which is set out at Appendix 1. By way of background, as you can see, and you're very familiar with this, we're required under the 2014 Local Government Act to produce a performance improvement plan each year. And consequently, as I say, at the March meeting, we brought forward improvement objectives for consultation. 3 of those objectives were sort of updated from previous year, and there were actually 2 new ones. At section 3.4 onwards then, in terms of the consultation itself, we used a number of channels in order to elicit feedback, and a total of 64 responses were provided. And in terms of very detailed responses, there's probably 10 to 12 detailed responses in terms of each of the questions areas, and they have been included in Appendix 2 for your information. In overall terms, as I say, there was very high levels of general agreement with our improvement objectives, and as indicated there, that agreement was in the range of either 87 to 98%, depending on the objective, and therefore we're not proposing any specific changes in respect of the improvement objectives. As I indicated, there was detailed feedback as well in a number of areas, and they've been forwarded to the heads of service and directors for consideration and action as appropriate. And consequently, the plan at Appendix 1 includes the finalised objectives in relation to our £711 million capital development programme, or support for health and well-being through improving our leisure, sports and physical activities, or a commitment to creating a greener, cleaner, more attractive district. Also, our commitment to establishing a local economic partnership and developing and delivering an action plan. And finally, our commitment to deliver improved customer satisfaction by improving our customer support services and processes. The recommendation, therefore, in front of you members is today that, subject to your comments, that the corporate plan and improvement plan for 26-27 at Appendix 1 is approved. Thank you, members.
Ellen, Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair. I want to look at the improvement objective 3.8.2 on page 103. And it's going back to something that Councillor Leonard referred to there, namely the isolated rural community. Now, I know we could very easily say, well, that's, that they're included in the most deprived areas. But there's obviously, when you look at the 8,000 target and the overall, there's overlap included in that. And I would like to see some sort of ring fencing that would identify those living in more isolated areas in the same way that we have identified people living with disabilities, etc., 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 because it is an issue. And not all of the isolated areas are actually deprived areas. So there's also that phenomenon that we have to look at. So a greater consideration there for those who do live in isolated areas and have suffer with regard to sport and physical activity programs going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. And are you happy to propose the plan?
Happy to propose, yes.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
happy to second that if you need a seconder.
Yep, no problem. Councillor Leonard. No, you're just, okay. Okay, does anybody else want to come in on that? No. Okay, thank you, Ellen. So that has been proposed by Alderman Hussey and seconded by Councillor Leonard. So moving on then to agenda item number 11, and that's Ellen again.
Yes, again, through you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek elected members' approval in relation to the continued membership of a number of organisations and associations. The report itself sets out that the council is obviously involved either as an elected member level or officers in terms of a number of organisations and may well also play a role in the governance of these bodies. At present, as I say, we're talking about 5 organisations which are set out under Section 2, and we've provided for members' consideration the indicative costs for the continued membership within 26-27. I would note, however, some of them, if we do withdraw, require minimum notice period. But again, the recommendation is subject to members' comments that a membership of these organisations identified is maintained for 26-27. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Ellen. So I need a proposer and a seconder then for this agenda item, please. Okay, it's proposed by Councillor Jackson and seconded by Councillor.
Chair, arising out of that, if I may.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Thank you. It's not with regard to the item, it's with regard to one of the organisations there, the Friend of the Psalm, that we are a corporate body of, or a corporate body membership of. Have officers received notification of the 110th anniversary commemorations? I know I've received it personally because I think I'm one of the representatives on Friend of the Psalm. I'm not sure who the other one is. If they have received it, will that be costed and put to members for consideration? Thank you.
Chair, I just through you, I don't recall seeing anything coming in, but maybe you have seen something.
No, through you, Chair, we actually received it today and we're preparing a paper for the June meeting of this committee, albeit it's really short notice, unless we have an opportunity to bring it forward elsewhere.
The back of that, obviously, it's early July. So will a costing be put to some committee that it can be considered or rejected, whatever?
Through you, Chair, again, we'll look at timing and decide which committee it has to come into. We'll make sure it comes in a timely fashion for consideration.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Ellen.
Okay, so moving on then to agenda item number 12, and that is Paula.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek members' approval on a council policy statement outlining the employer's discretion under the Local Government Pension Scheme regulations, which is attached at Appendix 1, and then the related severance and redundancy pay scheme, which is attached at Appendix 2. So as a council, we're required to publish and keep under review our policy statement on certain discretions we can exercise under the Local Government Pension Scheme regulations. So these regulations include discretion in a number of areas. The main areas are flexible retirement, early retirement in the interest of business efficiency, and shared cost of AVCs. So the policy is subject to review every 3 years. So then the related policy is the severance and pay redundancy scheme, which outlines our arrangements for employees who leave the council as a result of voluntary or compulsory redundancy. And this policy is also subject to review every 3 years. So both policies have been reviewed and include minor changes to reflect mainly changes in limits, maximum payment amounts as at April 26. A key change to both policies is from the 1st of April 2028, the earliest date that an ILGOS member can access payment of their pension will rise from 55 to 57. The trade unions have been consulted on both policies and are in agreement with these policies. So the policy has been screened out. Policies have been screened out for equality impact assessments. And again, we propose to keep these policies reviewed regularly and, if necessary, amend in light of any change in legislation. There are no financial implications associated with these policies at this time. Any financial implications incurred as a result of these policies will be brought back to committee in future reports. It's recommended that members approve the policy statement and severance and redundancy pay scheme as attached. Thank you.
Okay, Paula, okay, so we need a proposer and a seconder for that.
Happy to propose.
Okay,
Don't think
proposed
the next
Councillor Duffy
question.
and seconded Councillor Minnie. Did anybody have any comments on that or? No, okay, thank you, Paula. And then we're on to yourself again, Paula, for agenda item number 13, the review and update of pregnancy, maternity policy and guidance.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek members' approval on the Council's revised policy and guidance on pregnancy and maternity policy. So this policy has been reviewed to reflect changes in Northern Ireland employment legislation, including the parental bereavement leave, which is a result of the Leave and Pay Act 2022, and the extension of statutory bereavement rights to miscarriage from the 6th of April 2026. So the Parental Bereavement Leave Act introduces a statutory entitlement to 2 weeks parental bereavement leave and statutory parental bereavement pay available from day one of employment. So the new policy or the current policy has been revised to include this. So the overall policy provides clear guidance on entitlements to leave and pay, encompassing both statutory and contractual provisions, ensuring employees and managers understand their rights and responsibilities. Our policy also outlines the full range of support available to council employees, including during maternity leave, return to work, and in the event of pregnancy loss. So again, this policy will be reviewed every 3 years and updated where necessary in consultation with the recognised trade unions to ensure best practice and continued compliance with evolving legislation. So again, this policy has been screened out for equality impact assessment. It's recommended that members approve the pregnancy and maternity policy as outlined. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. We have Councillor Duffy.
Chair, Paul, thank you for bringing forward this report, and I am more than happy to propose this policy is adopted. I think that it's a really progressive and compassionate policy, and I was glad to see it being brought forward through Department for Economy and Kiva Archibald bringing it forward. We are the first here in these islands, so to speak, to have this really progressive policy. And I know from listening to parents who have been bereaved in the past, the flexibility of the policy as well just means so much, because you know sometimes the immediate aftermath is not when you need the leave, and so the fact that you can take that leave up to 56 weeks later, I think it's just really important, and that it's a day one right is also a really good aspect of the policy. So I'm glad to see the report being brought forward today, and more progressive policies like this is what we need to be doing. So thank you for bringing forward the report.
Very good, Councillor Duffy and Alderman Kerrigan online.
Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me in. And content enough in regards to the report as Paula has detailed it with reference to the bereavement loss and that additional work that Councillor Duffy has referred to. Now, just a point of clarification, because maybe I have read it incorrectly, Paula. And just in regards to my own council colleagues here, former Alderman Middleton and Alderman Cook, who is present at the meeting and is well able to speak to herself. But it's just in regards to this policy does not apply to elected representatives. And I'm just wondering in regards to that, because I just feel that difficulty, or if I picked this up incorrectly, because the like of Alderman former Alderman Middleton and Alderman Cook, they were not afforded a maternity allowance. They were not afforded someone to cover their role during that, and I'm just seeing there, there's that disparity in it, that the councillors themselves were voting for this for the staff, and to be fair, we're all getting a pay slip or a P60 there as so-called employee of the council, but it's not applicable. Or have I picked this up entirely wrong, Paula?
In terms of, the query in relation to the paid, any paid entitlement, again, it is, you have to reach the lower threshold. So in terms of the statutory and parental bereavement pay, and I would need to clarify whether councillors are entitled to statutory maternity pay or statutory sick pay. I don't think so, but maybe, Ellen, we can check that out.
No, thank you, Chair. Just to get the point of clarification, because I don't think it's right that we're voting for it. I'm content enough to support it, but it's just the case that it's not applicable for councillors, and the councillors are effectively being, it's another barrier, in my view, Chair, for young females to come into the council role.
Thank you, Alderman Kerrigan, for that, and Paula will come back to you on that one. Councillor Minnie?
Well, Chair, it's just that point. My understanding was always that councillors weren't employees, were members. We're in a different perspective on that. So those benefits may not even accrue to us or derive to membership or members, both male or female. So, councillor employees of council will be entitled to those benefits, not members, etc. Even our pay is different, actually, on an allowance rather than on that basis, but subject to clarification, obviously. Thank you, Chair.
If I just can clarify, yes, employees' terms and conditions are determined by the National Joint Council, which do strictly just apply to employees of the council.
Thank you, Paula. So we had the recommendation there. Councillor Duffy, you spoke first there. Were you happy to propose it? Yep. And Alderman Kerrigan, were you happy to second that?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Again, before you move on,
yeah,
it's just something crossed my mind. We've got two issues there with regard to employees and redundancy and maternity and those sorts of issues. Something just struck me there. Do council have a policy with regard to AI and the use of AI and the impact it may have on employment for our workers going forward? Do we have a policy? Because I don't know that much about it, but I hear that AI can be a threat to jobs. So do we have a policy with regard to that going forward?
So, Chair, we currently do not have an AI policy. It's a subject of much debate. There's a difference between what we might promote in the wider council area in terms of the use of AI or the use of AI within council. So we currently do not have that policy. It's a subject of considerable discussion among public bodies. And that's a piece of work that's under review. Just tying back into the previous conversation in terms of the conditions of members. We're happy to provide a little bit of advice on that, but that's mostly an issue that members may wish to raise either through NILGA or NAC, obviously, with regard to the last paper.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair. I think that Alderman Hussey raises an important point, and I would like to propose that we invite a representative from the Irish Congress of Trade Unions in for a deputation on their AI policy, because it's one that actually centres advocating for workers and having protections for workers. So that would impact and could be for a future for integrating protections for workers around the issues of AI. I think it'd be very helpful for members as well.
Okay, do we need that in writing?
Chair, I'm happy to second that. As long as it's a short, snappy, to the point presentation.
Can you guarantee that, Councillor Harkin? There we go, it's guaranteed. We've got it written down now. Right, okay, that's fine. I'll take that proposal then, Councillor Harkin. Thank you. So next agenda item is number 14, Paula again. Never rains but it pours, Paula.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to update members on the ongoing health and wellbeing support promoted through Council's Be Well programme. Again, it's recommended that members note the report and endorse the approach outlined. So the Council is committed to providing accessible, inclusive and proactive wellbeing support, ensuring all our staff can access services that help them stay healthy, resilient and engaged at work. And the report details, in quite a lot of detail, a lot of the initiatives that we currently have within the organisation. I'll just go through some of them, some of the main ones. So again, mental health remains at the heart of our Be Well programme, and with staff supported through a 24-hour employee assistance programme, and that programme offers confidential and counselling and advice, as well as regular mental health awareness sessions. Alongside this, staff have access to dedicated portal information, digital gym resources, discounts, webinars and practical guides. Then secondly, we also have a health cash plan which supports staff and practical assistance, again across a wide range of needs, so employees can claim back costs associated with dental care, physiotherapy and other wellbeing treatments. Another key service is our occupational health service, and that plays a vital and proactive role in supporting staff across the organisation, both when staff are actually off due to sickness absence and also when staff are actually in work as well. Again, through our digital and learning systems, we have a range of digital support, including Council's online learning zone, as well as our app, our Be Connected app. Then again, we also continue to support the Council's commitment around safeguarding and ending violence against women and girls strategy through ongoing awareness and training. And I will be bringing a report to committee next month, which will go into more detail on that particular initiative. And so again, this programme has been screened out for equality impact assessment, and there are no financial, legal or implications with this report at present. So again, it's recommended that members note the report and endorse the Be Well programme, recognising it as a strategic investment in our workforce. Endorsement signals our commitment to embedding wellbeing as a core organisational priority and empowering staff to thrive across all roles and locations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Alderman Hussey.
Just to propose a recommendation, and I think it's worthy of note that members actually do have access to the wellbeing programme, and I know I've utilised some of them in the past, and I'm sure other members of the chamber have as well. And the wellbeing programme includes a very good insurance scheme within it as well, that perhaps it might do any harm to just highlight that again in regard to the previous comments from Councillor Alderman Kerrigan with regard to other specific councillors, because it may have applied to them.
Yes, we can actually organise maybe a session for councillors which will go through the programme and the benefits that councillors can access through the programme, but there is quite a bit, yes.
Thank you, Paula. And Alderman Hussey, are you proposing that agenda? Yep. Okay, that's proposed by Alderman Hussey and seconded by Councillor Jackson, seconded, yep. Okay, is any other comments on that one? No. All right, so the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items are open for information. Does anybody want to raise anything in particular? Councillor Farrell?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's item 18. It's the correspondence from the Housing Executive regarding the fundamental review of allocations. I had raised it last month to make it a really, really quick response. So I'm glad that the Housing Executive have made it really, really clear that the proposed changes to the allocations are not happening this autumn, and it looks like it's going to be April next year. So there's a year before these changes are going to be implemented. So it's good that we have that clarity and the confusion has been removed. I think there's going to be people out there that want these changes to happen immediately, but that's not going to be the case. I think it's important that the Housing Executive take time to get this right in terms of their internal systems, staff training, etc. And I also believe it needs to be really, the communication around this needs to be really, really clear to people on the housing waiting list who are ultimately going to be impacted by these changes. But it's good that we have that update and we have that clarity from the Housing Executive. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Farrell. Does anybody else want to raise anything from the open for information? No? Okay, can I get a proposer and seconder to go into confidential? Councillor Money and Councillor Leonard.